Okay. It is 1 o'clock, so we're going to get started. This is Chris Richards, for those who are listening. Before we begin today, I'd like to make a few housekeeping announcements. Commissioners Carter, Levine, and Eddie Smith have previously notified us that they would be absent for this meeting and are excused per commission policy. Commissioner Griscom will act as chair for the Business Operations Committee and will also serve on the Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee for their meetings today. Thank you so much. And I now turn it over to Commissioner Griscom to serve with Business Operations.
There. Thank you, Chris. It's great to be in a leadership position again, if only momentarily. Welcome to the July 24th, 2025 meeting of the Business Operations Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. Link is provided on the Commission website for the public to view this meeting. Hayden, may I ask you to take a roll call?
Commissioner Lehrman.
Present.
Chairman Griscom.
Here.
Chairman, you have quorum.
Thank you, Hayden. Are there any other questions or comments from commissioners before we begin? The Business Operations Committee will hear several updates from staff on the agenda today. First, we'll hear a presentation on enterprise risk management from Executive Director Tess Stovall. Then Tess will present her Executive Director's operational update. And finally, the Commission's new Director of Finance and Operations, Lawrence Walker. Glad you're with us today, Lawrence. And we'll present budget updates, including the FY25 budget to actuals, and FY26 budget update, and a projected FY27 budget. Are there any questions or comments on the agenda before we take a vote to approve? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
Okay, so moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and the agenda is approved. The minutes from the meeting held on March 27, 2025 have been provided. Does anyone have comments or edits to make regarding the prior minutes before we proceed? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. And the minutes are approved. The first item on our agenda is a presentation on enterprise risk management from our Executive Director, Tess Stovall. Tess, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Griscom. I wanted to take a moment at this committee to discuss enterprise risk management for the purposes of the committee and the commission, because as an agency, this is something that we are required of and all agencies are required of. So when I was speaking to Chair Richards about this, we both agreed that this should be an annual topic that we revisit with the commission and just discuss how we are both identifying risk as a commission, but also working through controls. So we will highlight what the enterprise risk management is with regard to statute. We'll talk about the purposes of it and the objective settings we're required to do. We'll talk about the risk identification and controls and just high level what the commission needs to be aware of. So first, what is the Financial Integrity Act? So this is a statute that was passed by the General Assembly, and it requires each state agency to do an annual risk assessment on their overall functions. And so the goal is to ensure accountability, transparency, and effective controls. And so what that means is that the Office of Internal Audit of each agency, and for us, because we are administratively attached to the Department of Education, it is the Office of Internal Audit for the Department of Education, works with each agency to compile these risk assessments and then ultimately turn them over to Finance and Administration. So as a requirement of the enterprise risk management, each agency is required to set out their objectives. Basically, what is the agency required to do in statute? So we have to define those objectives that are in alignment with our purpose and law and what the overall mission is. And so for the commission, this part was pretty straightforward because we've already adopted a strategic plan. And so our objectives that we turned into the Internal Audit Office were directly aligned to what we've already outlined in our strategic plan. So high quality charter schools, strong operational effectiveness, community and stakeholder engagement, and then agency oversight. And so what those objectives are set, we have to define what are our KPIs for each of those objectives, as well as our level of risk tolerance. And, as we talked about this as a team, and even with Chair Richards, understanding that anything we do has a level of risk, right? If we're thinking about approving charter schools, we can have a host of controls, we can do a robust process, but ultimately the risk there is that a charter school could not perform. And so what are we doing in our control to ensure that we minimize that risk? And so we aligned these KPIs and our overall risk tolerance, which again, based on the strategic plan of the commission, as well as our historical results. So an example of a KPI that we identified was that the commission would receive a 3 or higher on the authorizer evaluation conducted by the State Board of Education. That is something that we benchmark, and we want to make sure that we do exceedingly well, which we do, but that's an example of how we kind of set our risk level based on what we know and then also what could happen in the future. And then after we set our objectives, each agency has to identify the possible risk and controls under each of those objectives. So in the example of the high quality charter schools, we identified as an example a risk that 80%, less than 80% of charter schools meet or exceed the standard in our performance framework. So examples of controls that we have there are strong application review process, a strong pre-opening process, an annual performance review, and a thorough renewal process every 10 years to do our best to ensure that over 80% of our schools are meeting our performance framework. On an annual basis, we are required to evaluate this enterprise risk management. And so what that looks like is that each fall, the Office of Internal Audit will reach out to the agency to collect our internal assessment. We'll review our previous year's assessment, our updated strategic plan that we've established, as well as any learnings. As we grow and learn as an agency, we may need to identify additional risks. We need to put in some additional controls. So that's a part of the process that happens every fall. I then review it with the commission chair before submission, and we will ensure that final documents are shared with the commission when those are completed. So in summary, what I want you all to be aware of is that this is a statutory requirement of all agencies, that we have completed it in the last 2 years. This will be our 3rd year completing it this fall. We closely align this with our strategic plan and the established benchmarks that we've already set. That risk is an inherent part of our work, and that we can do everything possible to think through what are the worst case scenarios and identify controls to minimize that risk. I did put the 2024 assessment documents. There are 2 spreadsheets in 10-share under this committee, should you want to dig deeper into all of the objectives, all of the risk, and all of the controls that we have set. And then once we turn in our 2025 assessment, I will update those materials for the committee later in the fall. And with that, that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Does Does any commissioner have a question for Tess? Seeing and hearing none, thank you, Tess, for that presentation. Our next agenda item is the operations update from, again, our executive director.
Thank you, Chair Griscom. For the operations update today, we have several exciting updates to share with the committee. First, I wanted to start with staffing. So we have had some significant staffing changes since March 2025, which we are excited to welcome new staff members and also to see some of our departing staff members go on to bigger and better things. As I said, it's like we're building a little nest and they're flying off to new horizons. But since March, we have hired, and I wanted to recognize each of those people. Maggie Stampley, if you'll wave, Maggie. Maggie is our new Director of School Programs and Support, so she leads the team that works on special populations and federal programs. We have a student data analyst, Fatima Fall. Terrence, she's a Memphian, so you all can, a Whitehaven grad, so y'all can chat later. So Fatima is working with Lawrence, and our latest hire, who starts on Monday, is taking over the manager of data operations role. So Fatima and Natasha will work together on all things student data. Our manager of strategic initiatives, Pam Lehman, this is our first meeting organizing, and so far so good, Pam, we're good. But she took over for Drajon Cummings, so handling everything from the strategic plan, meeting preparation, and then all other things that keeps the commission running. As was earlier stated, Lawrence Walker moved into the Director of Finance and Operations role, which we are thrilled to have him in that role after Melanie Harrell departed after 4.5 years from the commission. So we're thrilled to have Lawrence step up and lead that team, and excited to hear from him in a few minutes. And as I stated, our next hire will start on Monday. We have updated the commission's org chart on our website, as well as I do want to note that the General Assembly did create 4 additional positions for the commission in FY26. That is based on both the growth of the portfolio as well as the additional work that came with the passage of key legislation. So as we look and kind of get into the fiscal year, we will begin hiring for those key roles. The next update is related to office space. So as we have grown in terms of positions, that requires us to have additional office space and seating. And so I have contacted and been working with the Department of General Services to build out the remainder of our space on the 8th floor. We will be adding 9 additional seats. And I want to note that that is the extent of our space on the 8th floor. There is no more room in Davy Crockett for additional seating. That's primarily due to the state government in general moving towards consolidated office space and really having agencies use a rotational system or alternative workplace systems so that they can reduce the square footage of agencies from a cost perspective. So for right now, everyone does have a permanent seat, shall we say, but once those 9 seats are filled, we would have to move into a full rotational system. And then my next update is just to highlight what you probably have heard of regarding our FY26 federal funds. And so the U.S. Department of Education has put on pause several grants that we as a district have previously received. That includes Title II, Title III, and Title IV. And so we have communicated that to our schools that for now, those funds are not available. At this point, we are waiting for further information. I did want to make sure it is clear that 2 of the largest pots of money that we as a district receive, which are Title I and IDEA, are not impacted. And so we are working with the Department of Education and our schools to budget for those funds in particular so that they can start drawing down those funds as soon as possible. And when we receive additional updates from the Tennessee Department of Education, we will pass those along. My next update is around procurement. So there's one request for the committee under procurement. We do use the Student Information System PowerSchool. That is all of our schools use PowerSchool, which allows us to centrally report in data to the Department of Education. We are under the Department of Education's contract, so we as an agency are not contracting with PowerSchool. We are kind of a sub-agency, but we are anticipating that to be approximately $65,000 for the upcoming school year. That is based on the number of students that we have. So as we grow in terms of students, that price will increase, and that is covered by our authorizer fee. So I am asking the committee for approval with a maximum liability of the $65,000 in PowerSchool costs. And then finally, want to turn to meeting dates for the commission. So in terms of 2025, our remaining meeting dates are going to be August 27th. We have a virtual meeting to handle Metro Nashville Charter School appeals. And then we do have our final quarterly meeting on October 16th and 17th here in Nashville. I did want to note that Chair Richards and I did discuss this week that we are going to be moving our committee meetings virtual for the October meeting, similar to what we've done in the past, so that we can focus exclusively or primarily on New Start appeals. So do look for early next week to a poll for committee dates so we can go ahead and get those set. And then finally, we do have 2026 meeting dates that are up for approval, and I would ask the committee to approve and move them forward to the commission. These are based on both our statutory requirements. So given new legislation, we did have to adjust our second quarter meeting dates for 2026. We also polled commissioners, and we selected the dates where we had sufficient quorum for these dates. And with that concludes my updates, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Does any commissioner have a question for Tess? Bear with me one sec. For those of you all who have not seen, let me just sort of read the meeting dates for 2026. Quarter one is January 22, 23. Quarter two is April 16, 17. Quarter three is July 23, 24. And quarter four is October 8 and 9. So if there's no questions, there's two items we're going to vote on. So do I have a motion to approve the PowerSchool procurement?
So moved.
Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the procurement is approved. Do we have a motion for approval of the 2026 commission meeting dates?
So moved.
Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, noes. Ayes have it, and the meeting dates are approved. Thank you, Tess, for your update. And let me make one comment to those of you all who I asked Tess earlier, and I'm glad she did, because there are new faces here for us. So welcome. We're glad you're here. I think it's also a sign for a commission that for some of us who were here when it started to now see a transition of people coming through. It's always good to have some people who are staying with us and bring the experience that they have to help us to sort of navigate as we get larger and we have more issues. So welcome. We're glad you're here, and I hope you will find that we're pretty easy to work with. So with that, our final item today.
May I just,
Yes.
just an informational request on the PowerSchool contract? I assume we've looked at other providers, or at least are aware of just some other options for that, or I don't know whether we even have any authority over that. But just curious if there was any information produced in the course of looking at.
Sure, and I'll actually, I don't know if Lawrence wants to speak to that more specifically, but the long and the short is the state has certain providers that they say that districts can contract with or use because they talk to the state system. There are four or five providers. So we've only ever used PowerSchool from the very beginning of our school system setup back in the state board and when it was transitioned to the commission. If we would want to move to a new provider, we could do that under one of the four. It would require all of our districts to move all of our schools to move to a new provider. And that's something that we would regularly evaluate. I would say probably the costs are going to be about the same in terms of what we would be looking to spend. But when Lawrence, I'm happy for Lawrence to wax poetically about senior information systems if I missed anything that,
It's the first time I've been on the mic. This is great. No, I think you said it. We've used Power School the whole time we've been a district, and they all have their pros and cons. So we kind of look through them. In certain state trainings, they have table setups, and we talk to different companies, kind of weigh pros and cons. But like you said, we would be moving every school and changing their system to a new SIS. So we do evaluate it, but I think we've always seen that Power School is easier for us to stay with.
Do we have a way of just getting feedback periodically from the schools and just in terms of their user experience on Power Schools?
Yeah, then we could. It's-
and I would also, just to add, the state has been talking about going out for a new RFP for student information providers. They keep saying they're going to do that. So I think in the next year or so, they will go back out and say, you have to re-up for contracts. So at that point, that will be a decision point for us. Let's say, for example, they don't contract again with Power School or they contract with a new vendor. We would then evaluate, are we staying with Power School or are we moving to a new vendor? And does that make financial sense? Does that make operational sense for our schools to move to a new vendor? But I think there are a lot of school systems that use Power School. There are some that use Infinite Campus.
Yeah. I think those are the two main
Williamson
ones that
County,
I've
I know,
seen.
uses
Yeah.
Skyward. I mean, there are 3 or 4 that most districts in the state use.
And I won't belabor this, but I would be interested as we explore that, what are the capabilities of alternative systems, especially as it relates to potentially communications with parents and whether some of those systems enable capabilities that we currently don't have or are executed less optimally than we'd like.
Thank you.
So our final item today is updates on the FY25 budget to actuals, the FY26 budget, and the FY27 projected budget from Director of Finance and Operations, Lawrence Walker. Lawrence, you're recognized.
Thank you. So, as you said, Lawrence Walker, Director of Finance and Operations. I'll be walking through key budget updates for fiscal year 24, true up, 25 budget to actuals, 26 amended budget, and 27 preliminary budget. All materials have been provided prior to this meeting for your review, but I'll give an overview for the committee. Beginning with the FY24 true up. On May 14th, the Tennessee Department of Education finalized the per pupil revenue for Metro Nashville at approximately $14,860. Since our charter schools have been paid a higher rate over the course of the year, this resulted in our schools located in Metro Nashville having to repay a combined amount of approximately $1,026,180 back to Metro Nashville. This included a portion of the commission authorizer fee revenue that we had collected. There are a number of factors that contributed to that clawback, including the gradual decrease or tapering of federal funds, and then local government budget adjustments to actual revenue collected. Going forward, due to the timeline of our district final expenditure report to the department, we expect the timeline of final true-ups to be similar next year. Moving to FY25 budget to actuals. We've updated our budget to actuals to reflect our current spending and drawdown, reflective of expenditures from July 1st to May 31st. We also received our June FY25 TISA true-up, which included adjustments for changes in average daily membership. It is important to note that 3 of our schools, those being Bluff City High School, Lester Prep, and Rutherford Collegiate Prep, they had to repay funds due to declines in their ADM over the year. over the school year. While Bluff City and Leicester Prep owed a pretty minimal amount, Rutherford Collegiate owed substantial repayment, approximately $375,000, due to a decline in their enrollment over the year. A final note for FY25 is that Davidson County schools are currently being paid about $500 more per pupil than the FY24 final per pupil rate that we just discussed. And if local revenue collections remain under projections like this year, we may face another clawback related to the FY25 revenue. However, despite these adjustments, our expenditures are under budget. We are projecting a surplus, and we project that the authorizer fee will cover about 98% or over 98% of our agency's expenses for FY25.
I just want to take a note, 98%, we are very close to being at sustainability just for this year. We'll talk about next year, but I just want to say, having rounded out almost 5 years, I think it's really amazing that we are at sustainability, at least for this year.
Yeah. Thanks. Moving to FY26. So for FY26, we've submitted an amended budget for a vote today. This includes updated revenue assumptions based on FY25 TISA and enrollment data, and it accounts for schools opening or expanding in the 25-26 school year. We've also requested 2 positions from Finance and Administration, which were included in the governor's budget, and this is in addition to the 2 positions previously granted from the General Assembly. So those positions that Tess alluded to earlier. And these are to support our growing responsibilities, including the direct application pathways. Given the additional work streams, we do project a smaller reversion for FY26 compared to FY25. Also, although we anticipate having to access more of the general fund appropriation, we still expect to revert funds back to the state, and that's even with conservative revenue estimates for the year. And finally, looking ahead to FY27, we've prepared a preliminary budget based on current enrollment and TISA data and expanding schools. The budget assumes no additional growth beyond already approved expansions. Staffing levels for this budget are projected to remain as is with the currently approved positions and budget authority. And most of the expenditures are static except for increases in contracted services, which scale with student population and employee travel. As we progress through this year's authorization cycle, we'll refine our projections and coordinate with Finance and Administration on any necessary adjustments. And we'll update the committee on our budget request during the next meeting. And so I am happy to take any questions or provide any further detail on any of these items.
Does any commissioner have a question? Because so is there, knowing what you all have worked on this year with the metro schools, is there any way to better anticipate going forward if we think the same issue is going to be there, so that there's planning right now, particularly by our schools, to anticipate that that they may have a shortfall again?
Thank you. I think we have communicated to schools that they should be prepared for a similar repayment based on the fact that the FY24 final per pupil was lower than what they were being paid at for FY25. And that is similar to what we communicated last year in terms of we were hearing from our counterparts that to anticipate having to repay. I do want to note that in previous years, the opposite has occurred, where Metro Nashville actually owed
the commission and its charter schools money because they collected revenue higher than they had budgeted. And so this is an annual cycle where we have to prepare both ourselves in terms of keeping reserves and our schools for the potential of the final true-up and what that means in terms of repayment or collections.
Thank you. As we look at the new legislation that allowed direct appeal, and there's probably no way to project this now, but I want to ask it anyway, because we know where we are in terms of growth with schools at this point. Are we prepared if there's a significant jump because of this new pathway being open to be able to address that? Meaning, do you think that there's a need to at least anticipate additional staff in the next budget cycle?
So my response to that is, given the fact that we were allocated 4 additional positions beyond what we currently have, I feel, and I think the team feels comfortable with where we sit in terms of both the workflow that we know we have with 24 schools, as well as the anticipation of any additional schools that we come down and get approved. We also know that pending the upcoming appeal cycle and then pending any additional applications we receive directly to us, that may change. But I think collectively, we feel like we have the capacity as it stands right now to take on additional schools without a drastic need in additional staff at this time.
Okay, thank you. Do commissioners have any other questions? If not, well done, Lawrence. Thank you. I'll now entertain a motion to approve the amended FY26 budget.
So moved.
Second, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. And the amended FY26 budget is approved. Is there a motion to approve the preliminary FY27 budget?
So moved.
Second, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. So the FY27 preliminary budget is approved. Thank you all for your attendance and participation in this meeting of the Business Operations Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. At this time, I'd like to ask if there are any final comments. Hearing none, the next meeting of the Business Operations Committee is currently scheduled for October 16, 2025, and it will be virtual, right?
Well, it's going to be virtual and it's going to be moved. 'Cause
Gotcha,
our
okay.
current plan is to have full commission meetings, both the 16th and the 17th, to handle our appeals cycle.
Thank you. That's what I thought we heard. So
Yeah.
we will have a Business Operations Committee meeting in October. It will be within that time window. Okay, thank you. Next, so if there are no further comments, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. Have a second? All those in favor say aye. Ayes have it, and we are now adjourned. Thank you.
Well done. You still got it. You still got it.
All right. I'm Terrence Patterson, and welcome everyone to the July 24th, 2025 meeting of the School Performance and Accountability Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. A link has been provided on the commission website for the public to view this meeting. Hayden, could you please take a roll call vote of our commissioners? Commissioner Griscom.
Here.
Commissioner Richards.
Here.
Chair Patterson.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Okay, thanks, Hayden. The School Performance and Accountability Committee will hear several presentations today from staff. First, Deputy Director of Authorizing Maggie Lund will present on the charter renewal criteria. Then Maggie and our Data and Accountability Coordinator, Rebecca Letterber, will present updates to the school performance framework on final reading. And then Authorizing Coordinator Sophie Benefeld Gilmore will then provide an update on the pre-opening process. And finally, we'll go back to Maggie, and she'll give us a preview of the 25-26 school year. Do any commissioners have questions or comments on the agenda before we vote to approve? Okay, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. The ayes have it, and the agenda is approved. The minutes from the committee meeting held on March 27th, 2025 have been provided. Does anyone have any edits or comments to make does anyone have any edits or comments to make regarding the prior minutes before we proceed? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from
So
March?
moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. So our first item is a presentation on the renewal criteria from Deputy Director of Authorizing Maggie Lund. Maggie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Patterson. I'm going to talk briefly about the renewal criteria that we discussed at length last meeting on first read, but it is before you for final read today. So quality authorizing standards and statute require that we adopt renewal criteria. This is in alignment with State Board of Education policy. This was also outlined as part of our recent authorizer evaluation. As just a general note, we have had renewal criteria prior. We've, up until this point, only fielded renewals through the Achievement School District schools that have transitioned to the commission. So that renewal criteria was highly contextualized for those situations. But given that we are continuously growing and expanding our portfolio of schools that come to us directly and stay with us, we kind of have a need to develop a long-standing, overarching set of renewal criteria for all schools within our portfolio. So that is what this criteria is intended to be and do. Where we landed from our last meeting is at the criteria you have in front of you. There are 3 sections to the criteria. We have academic performance, organizational performance, and financial performance. As I mentioned, this criteria is meant to be broad and overarching. So for academic performance, it's that the school has met standard for the majority of the years in the current charter term, and they meet standard for at least 2 of the 3 most recent years. And then organizational performance and financial performance have similar criteria where we're looking for majority of years in the current charter term meeting standard, and that 2 of the 3 most recent years meet standard, or they haven't had any does not meet standard in consecutive years. And again, these are criteria that are meant to be discussed at length with schools. This isn't like a one and done situation where it's like if you don't meet this, there's no discussion on this, right? This is just an invitation for further discussion if context is needed for some of these criteria. So we have shared the criteria with our operators in March after our conversation for first read. We did this through our quarterly stakeholder meeting and also via email, so our operators have seen this criteria. We have not made any changes between first and final read. Also want to note here, given the updates with Public Chapter 275, this criteria also will apply for differing charter terms, and it is broad enough that it can do so. And upon approval on final read, we will share this again with operators because this is something that they're held to. It'll be updated on our website, and this will be communicated for future renewal and interim reviews.
I just want to clarify because we have a couple of the last ASD schools on appeal in the current cycle. As I understood it, these criteria will apply going forward, but will not apply to those schools. They'll be under the old criteria.
This will apply to all schools going forward.
Okay, so it will apply to the
Yes.
ones we're going to hear in October?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, thanks, Maggie. The next item on our agenda are updates to the school performance framework from Maggie and our data and accountability coordinator, Rebecca Letterber. Maggie and Rebecca, you're recognized.
Thank you. We have similarly made updates to policy 3.700, which is our school performance framework. As discussed back in our last meeting, after 3 years of implementation of this framework, there were just some needed adjustments that needed to be made, particularly for the academic and organizational performance sections. I really appreciate the robust discussion that we had in our last session for the School Performance Framework and Accountability Committee. I think ultimately the updates that we made were really out of the fruitful discussion that we had during that meeting. We made updates to 2 indicators within the organizational performance section of the framework between first and final read, and so I'll talk through those. The first was an adjustment to 1D, which is the school retaining students, so our students staying enrolled throughout the year and year over year. There was great discussion that we had about setting a threshold or comparing the school to itself over time. Ultimately, as a result of the discussion, I think where everybody landed was concern around when you compare a school to itself over time without a threshold, a school could still meet standard with very low student retention rates. And so after that discussion and some additional data pulls from our data whiz, we came to the conclusion that a 70% student retention rate was the most appropriate indicator for this. And so that's where we've landed today for final read. To meet standard, 70% of student, we're looking for a retention rate for 70% for students. The other indicator that we had great discussion on was 4G, which is teacher retention. Ultimately, as we discussed, this is a little bit of uncharted territory here in terms of where we are with the national teacher shortage. We know that it is highly difficult to attract and retain teachers. We also know that there are many factors that go into teacher retention. We know model is a big piece of that. And then also the reliability of data for that is challenging as well in terms of the data source in which we're getting that information. So with that discussion, the commission decided to, or recommended removing that from the framework. This doesn't mean that it will not be a key piece to discuss with our schools. We will discuss it at not only their site visits in which we're in their buildings, but also at their annual closeout meetings where we meet with them and discuss their performance over the course of the year. And it's something that we will continue to track and monitor because we do believe that teacher retention is a really critical indicator for our schools in terms of overall organizational health. But it's just really challenging right now to set some form of threshold to hold schools accountable to that just across the board in our framework. So that's where we've landed with that. I already went through those slides. One thing I do want to note about student retention, going back to student retention, this is the pressure test that we provided for you for the 70% retention rate. I think, where we've landed is that's a very fair rate given where most of our schools are falling. So wanted to provide that in your materials as well in case there are any further questions on that. So our next steps here, we've already briefed our operators about this. We discussed this in our quarterly stakeholder meeting and sent out updates via email. So the request is now that the commission approved policy 3.700. Because this is an appendix to a charter agreement, our general counsel will reach out to operators with this information, and so they'll have to sign an acknowledgement form stating that they understand the updates to the policy.
Great. Any questions or comments from commissioners?
Was there any feedback, positive or negative, on the new retention rate from the operators?
We did not receive any feedback, positive or negative. I think when we engaged with them in discussion at the quarterly stakeholder meeting, particularly around teacher retention, there was just general consensus that it's just a really tough indicator to nail down. So, but no major feedback either way.
And I would just add, once we did the data dive and really analyze that
the vast majority of our schools would hit the 70% student retention rate, and that we had 2 schools that didn't in the previous year. One was in Nashville, one was in Memphis. So we felt like 70% was a bar that, from a geographic perspective, schools could meet, and that on a year-over-year basis, we felt like 70% was something that the vast majority of our portfolio could achieve.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is an update on the pre-opening process from our authorizing coordinator, Sophie Benefeld-Gilmore. Sophie, you're recognized.
Great. Thank you, Chair Patterson. I am Sophie Benenfeld-Gilmore. I am the authorizing coordinator. I ran the pre-opening process this year, and I'm excited to give you all an update on our 7 pre-opening schools this year. So a quick overview of the pre-opening process. After the schools are authorized by the end of October, the pre-opening process officially kicks off in the beginning of November. Throughout the process, we have monthly one-on-one check-ins with operators focusing on answering any questions and helping outline deliverables for each month. We also provide monthly best practice trainings that start in February, led by different teams across the office to learn best practices for operating within the LEA. School walkthroughs are the culmination of our process at the end, where we verify that schools are ready to open at the end of the summer. I am now going to talk a little bit about the ready to open criteria. So school year 24-25 was our first year utilizing the ready to open criteria within the pre-opening checklist. There are 5 categories within it: the startup plan, facilities, staffing, enrollment, and the financial plan. These are the items most necessary to help schools be successfully ready to open within their allotted time frame and not delay. These are not new items in the pre-opening checklist, but instead they're separated out as just being the most crucial ones for the successful opening. So our one-on-one meetings with operators each month always centered around facilities, staffing, and enrollment, which I will go into a little bit more deeply now. First was enrollment. Schools had a bit of difficulty meeting our ready to open criteria enrollment targets. So we were hoping for them to be 75% enrolled by April and 100% enrolled by June. Right now, they're at about 75 to 80% on average. It was particularly difficult to generate momentum in enrollment in the earlier months. We're thinking about just adjusting the dates and the enrollment targets so that it feels more feasible for schools next year. Specifically, Memphis schools had a harder time getting increased momentum for enrollment until later over the summer, where it picked up, and that's something operators initially reached out to us about to tell us. We also found that schools who chose their locations purposefully and selected a model purposefully had that translated to higher enrollment numbers overall. Yeah.
Sorry, what do you mean by model in that context?
Model as in a type of school, like a Montessori school.
Thank you.
And I think just to add on,
Yes.
so what we saw is that schools that are offering a unique model, as in Invictus, which is a Montessori model in an area of town where there is limited choice, they had a much easier time meeting their enrollment projections than we are seeing in areas where I wouldn't say it's, a more of a traditional college prep model in an area of town such as in Nashville, like the southeast area. There's a lot of choice already there. So the competition for students is just increased. And so what we are seeing is, on the whole, schools are not meeting their year one enrollment projections, and what we are seeing in their budgets, they're not meeting them. Some of them are, close, some of them are much further away, and that we're seeing that the schools that are locating in areas with less choice, they're just seeing a higher demand for their schools. And what this will translate into is when we talk about our new start appeal process, we know that there's a high likelihood that schools likely will not meet their enrollment projections in year one. Therefore, contingency planning and budgeting will be even more important.
So So just to clarify, so like as of today, they're at 75%, most are?
As a whole, about, 75-80%.
Yeah, that number worries me quite a bit. Do we feel worried about that?
So
as
that's
a
an
whole?
average, right?
Right,
So
okay.
that's going to be everyone from, some of our schools are at 100%
Yeah.
or 95%. Some of our schools are going to be lower than that. I would say we feel very good about where people are sitting as of right now because we have, asked them to provide adjusted budgets. And we also know that particularly for our Memphis schools, that number will increase even from now until, and I'm seeing my Memphis, like, we'll get some late enrollments as of, in kind of the August 15th numbers. And then I will also say some of our schools that have the lowest percentages are a part of networks. And so they are kind of managing through financial constraints because they're just a part of a larger network and they can more slowly grow. The schools that are single sites are some of the schools that we have the highest enrollment at.
So you're saying you think the number will continue to increase? Because I think my assumption was sometimes it decreases, like people just don't show up on day one. Like that certainly happens.
I think that's absolutely the case, but I think specifically for our Memphis schools, that we anticipate that number will continue to increase and will settle out mid-August.
Yeah, I want to take this and move it a little bit different. So for those schools that ask to delay their opening, okay? This criteria is laid out here is really great for somebody getting a pre-open. Is there any reason or consideration that if we get the request saying we want to delay for a year, to actually take this and sit down and work with them and say, these are the kind of areas you need to be focused on? The 1 year delay isn't just to kick the can and forget about it. You need to be doing these things. We know this works. It's the process we go through for pre-opening. And we want you all, and we sort of take these schools that ask and say, we want you to start working against this and showing that you're able to recognize these, because then we know that we're not going to get a second request to delay again. So I just wanted to say, does this also potentially have use for those who ask us to delay their opening?
Yes, we do use that with schools that have asked to delay. We have certain benchmarks for them to hit. Thank you. Awesome. All right. Next, I'll talk about staffing. Following national staffing trends, staffing remains a challenge for most of our schools, specifically in finding licensed staff. Some schools have found it helpful to work with external partners to help find staffing to help build that capacity. The most difficult to staff areas we've seen have been special education and supporting English language learners and other more specialized positions like art, music, and PE. In the last month, so going back, we've asked schools with lower enrollments to provide us weekly updates with number of seats accepted, the enrollments in progress, and completed enrollments. And so those schools with the lower than expected enrollment have also been working to adjust staff accordingly, such as holding off on making offers or the possibility of having fewer classrooms overall. Okay. Next, I will talk about facilities. All the pre-opening schools this year are on track to open in their new facilities for this school year. But it's also important to note that 2 of our brand new pre-opening schools from last year had to delay opening to this year because of facilities challenges. So we do expect facilities to continue to be a challenge for new schools in the future. We've also had schools who are finishing up their pre-opening process tell us just how difficult securing a facility was, even when they had ample funding. Commission staff are completing walkthroughs of all our pre-opening facilities during the month of July to ensure that on-time start for these schools in the first week of August.
Was obtaining facilities noticeably harder in Davidson County than in Shelby County, or were they about the same?
It's a good question. I didn't start my pre-opening. I didn't start in my role as pre-opening until after they had secured the facilities.
This
so it's
wasn't
hard
a
for me
trick
to say.
question.
No.
Sorry.
I appreciate. No. You're good.
I'm going to say it's harder. It has been markedly harder and more expensive for our Rutherford County and Metro Nashville schools just because of the the commercial demand on space. This is not to say that our school that's opening in Memphis, it was not challenging for them, but that there's just somewhat more of availability of facilities. I think the challenge with there, and Maggie, you can speak to it, I think it was there might be a facility available, but the potential renovation costs in Memphis were exceedingly high depending on the facility. So finding the right facility that could meet the renovation costs. The current school, the school that is opening is actually co-locating with another new school to cut down on their facility costs and their renovation costs.
Yeah, okay, my other question is, I know Wooddale was approved to acquire their facility. Is that going along in order?
That is correct. So we have had several schools, both Wooddale as well as our under the Capstone group, who have been able to receive permission to purchase from Memphis Shelby County Schools their facilities.
Okay. Thank you. I think it's really important to highlight where we can situations where Memphis Shelby County works with charters to help facilitate utilization of facilities. You know, it's one of the things that we want to catch them doing something right and, you know, thank them for that, because, I mean, it's critical to Wooddale's success that they get to keep that building. So I'm overjoyed to hear that they're on target.
Thank you. Great. Next, I'll give a quick update on board engagement. We as a commission have been focusing on board engagement overall, but it's especially crucial for our pre-opening schools to have boards who are engaged and understand how the school is progressing during this time. They should be aware of the facilities, staffing, and enrollment changes so they know how to best support their schools. I now want to give a quick update on American Classical Academy Jackson-Madison, otherwise known as Madison Classical Academy. So staff has met regularly with their governing board since the school's approval in October 2023, specifically for pre-opening updates in alignment to the ready-to-open criteria. Therefore, they held the school accountable for timelines included within their request to delay. We engaged in transparent conversations, and we are supportive of their decision to focus on their Rutherford campus, and therefore their decision to relinquish the charter for American Classical Academy, Jackson-Madison. And finally, looking forward to next year. So after reflecting on our pre-opening process this year, we're looking for ways to better support our schools in the future, especially as our portfolio grows. Therefore, we're developing a pre-opening guidebook that will have helpful resources for their submissions, including exemplars of more difficult deliverables, as well as an FAQ document. Commission staff are also soliciting feedback from pre-opening schools as we wrap up this year's process, so the FAQs will likely come from those conversations and conversations we've had during the year. As a commission, we've also started implementing trainings to support schools specifically during year one of operation. These trainings are already underway and made available to all schools, although they're focused on our first year of operation schools. And so far, commission staff and schools have been really pleased with this increased support. And with that, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to kicking off next year's process this fall.
Thanks.
Did the
Sophie, any questions?
prioritization of the Rutherford County campus, does that come with sort of more students joining that campus? Or I'm just curious, it's just a focus question, or is there an expansion?
That is their
Rutherford
campus authorized by Rutherford County.
Right. It's up and running? Forgive my
Yes.
ignorance. Okay.
No, you're good. It
Are they
opened this
planning
year.
to expand the number of students there? I'm just wondering when they talk about prioritize.
Sure, I'm happy to take that. So they just opened their Rutherford County campus in the 24-25 school year. They opened small, I can't recall, K4, K3, and it will expand, I think, all the way up to K12. So it will continue expansion. They have had some organizational changes in terms of their charter management organization, and they realized that they needed to focus on making Rutherford County really successful before they were ready to replicate and open in Jackson-Madison. I just want to name that we appreciate the transparency of their governing board.
we were highly communicative throughout the process and support their decision to focus and make sure that the Rutherford County campus continues to be a strong operator and deliver high-quality results for students. And then when they are ready to replicate, to do so with a lot of learned experience.
Yeah, that's great, thanks.
And so does that mean they would have to restart the process if they were to open a new school?
That is correct. So at this point, they would have to apply to their local district if they wanted to restart the process.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you, Sophie. 2 points that I had written down. One before Commissioner Richards made her point, but one, this is a reminder that opening a charter school is hard work. And I'm grateful that we have a really good balance of compliance, but also support in making sure that we're holding schools accountable. So hats off to the team. And then the second point is that, and it's related, opening a charter school also requires a lot of partnership. And also grateful for the team and the community, but also I think our local LEAs that are willing to work with our schools, especially around this facilities challenge. So also just want to acknowledge that, but also show appreciation for the team and your ability to shepherd through a very difficult process. So thank you for that. Our last item is the preview of the 25-26 school year from Maggie. Maggie, you're recognized again.
Thank you, Chair Patterson. I'm going to provide a preview for school year 25-26. So we keep talking about our expansion of our portfolio and our 7 pre-opening schools. So the schools that we have opening for this next school year are listed on the screen here. We have Empower Career and College Prep in Memphis. We have Invictus Nashville Charter School. That's a Montessori model. And they're located in kind of northeast Donaldson area of Nashville. Encompass Community School. We have KIPP Antioch Global Elementary, Leeds Southeast Elementary, and Nurses Middle College, Nashville. The one kind of rounding out the 7, as Chair Richards was talking about, is Wooddale Middle School. They transitioned to the commission and are opening under the commission. They're an already existing school, but transitioning authorizers for this next school year. And then, as we mentioned, no longer opening next year is Madison Classical Academy. So when we look at our portfolio at large, we have 9 schools in Memphis, Shelby County in the geographic district. Those are listed here on your screen. And we now have 14 schools within the Metro Nashville Public Schools geographic district. Also listed on your screen, and again, this is including our schools that are opening this school year. We have 1 school in Rutherford County, Rutherford Collegiate Prep. And that brings us to a grand total of 24 schools. So for those of us who have been with the commission since its infancy, we have been from 4 to 24. So we keep talking about rapid expansion, and here it is. Any questions about our portfolio overall before I move on to some other items? Okay, great. Quickly kind of want to talk about some much anticipated information on academic accountability data and what that release timeline looks like. So in mid-August, we have the TCAP estimates by school coming. October, we have school TVOS scores. And remember, TVOS is our growth measure. End of November, we'll have federal designations, so we'll know kind of our priority schools and our reward schools. Late December, we will get letter grades. And then January 1, we compile and release our annual report of kind of the roll-up of the performance of all of our schools in our portfolio. So we'll continue to provide you updates as this information is released and publicly available for our discussion. Similar to what we were speaking about with pre-opening, we have some other schools within our portfolio kind of outside of the pre-opening process that have undergone some facility updates and expansions. The first is Nashville Collegiate Prep High School. So they've added a high school. The high school facility is opening for next year. We're doing our facility walkthrough here in a couple weeks. Additionally, Libertas School of Memphis has added a middle school. They've been scaling that opening year over year and have moved into their new middle school facility and will be opening within that facility next year. So we'll be doing that walkthrough next week. And then Cornerstone Prep, formerly known as Cornerstone Prep School, now Cornerstone Prep Knight Road Campus, has secured a facility that is their permanent home. They were in a temporary facility for a while as they were expanding opening year over year. But they have now, for this next school year, will move to their new facility. So we were also going to be walking through that facility next week as well. So exciting things on the facility front. For this next school year, we have some high-stakes reviews coming up. Remember, as we talked about with our renewal criteria conversation, high-stakes reviews include both schools undergoing the renewal process as well as interim reviews, which are the halfway midpoint of the 10-year charter agreement. Bluff City High School is beginning their renewal process this school year. They will receive their cumulative performance report, which is a roll-up that we generate as an authorizing team of their performance over the last 9 years. That is available to them. It's provided to them in January. And then in April, they'll submit their renewal application to us, and that will kick off their renewal process. Nashville Collegiate Prep is also undergoing the interim review process. So we will kind of kick that process off in December. And that includes a full-day site visit there where we'll discuss not only their data over the last 5 years, but also where they see themselves going within the next 5 years. We also have done some adjustments in terms of looking at performance review letters. These were formerly known as quarterly review letters, which is just really an effort for transparency in terms of how our schools are trending to perform on our school performance framework, the organizational performance section primarily. So really what that means is we're providing on certain key indicators within the school performance framework kind of updates as to how schools are trending over the course of the year. So these things include like teacher licensure. You have X number of unlicensed teachers that you need to get resolved by this time. A lot to do with compliance and special populations, et cetera. And that's really just an effort for us to kind of check in with the schools and say, this is what we're seeing, this is how you're trending. You have until this date to kind of fix that if you're looking to correct it to meet standard on the school performance framework at the end of the year. As I said, we used to do those quarterly. We're now going to do 2 letters. We found that this is just a better cadence in terms of the kind of pattern of the school year, but also with governing board meetings and how they tend to trend. So schools will now receive one in mid-November, which will be from July 1 through October 15th. And then one in mid-April, which will be October 16th through March 15th. Schools also have a annual closeout meeting, which takes place right around now. We're doing it with most of our schools last week, this week, and next week, where we'll kind of talk through how the schools rolled up that section in terms of their performance over time. And so these quarterly letters, now known as performance review letters, are really what we use to kind of bubble up for that end conversation as to what was resolved over the course of the year with those indicators. We are not making any changes to the indicators themselves, just kind of the cadence of those letters. Governing board engagement. Staff has successfully conducted the first year of annual board engagement. This was for this last school year. Tess liked to call it her grand tour. It was really great. Honestly, I think we're really committed to continuing this engagement. We're working with schools right now to schedule out the visits for this next school year, planning to attend at least one board meeting for each school within our portfolio over the course of the year. So we aim to begin these visits in November and continue them throughout the school year. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, if there's no questions, thank you for your attendance and participation at this meeting of the School Performance and Accountability Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. At this time, I'd like to ask if there are any final comments. The next meeting of the School Performance and Accountability Committee is currently scheduled for October 16th, 2025. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the ayes have it, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
start it, or do you start it?
No, you start.
Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. Welcome to the July 24th, 2025 meeting of the Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. A link has been provided on the commission website for the public to view this meeting. For the purposes of this meeting and per commission policy, Chair Richards has asked Commissioner Griscom to sit on the committee. Thank you, Commissioner Griscom. Hayden, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Griscom.
Here.
Chair Smith.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Great. Thank you, Hayden. On today's agenda, we'll start with an ADA overview by our new Manager of Strategic Initiatives, Pam Lehman. Following that, we'll have several LEA policies, commission policy, and commission rule updates to be presented by General Counsel Ashley Thomas for a vote. Do any commissioners have questions or comments before we vote to approve the agenda? Is there a motion to approve the agenda? I'll second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The agenda is approved. The minutes of the committee meeting held on March 27th, 2025 have been approved. Does anyone have any edits to make regarding the prior minutes before we proceed? Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the March 2nd? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. The first item on our agenda today will be a presentation of the ADA initiative by Manager of Strategic Initiatives, Pam Lehman. Pam, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Smith. I'm excited to share this update and kind of overview of the ADA initiative. So the Department of Justice published a final rule updating the regulations for Title II of the ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act. And this final rule has specific requirements about how to ensure that web content and mobile applications are accessible to people with disabilities. The deadline for this is April of 2026, so we still have a lot of time to make sure all of our documents are meeting those requirements. But we've already started taking steps to ensure that our materials are meeting those accessibility guidelines. And just wanted to highlight some of the things we're doing because you may start to notice that our website and some of the materials we're sharing might start to look a little bit different because we are applying all of these things to PDFs, Word documents, PowerPoints, Excel spreadsheets, and so forth. And so just to share a few examples of the things that we are updating and things we're doing is one of those is we are adding descriptive links to text. So rather than having a link that says click here or more information, it is a descriptive link that shares exactly what the person is going to be clicking on. If they are using a screen reader, they'll be able to hear what the link is. Another one we're doing is ensuring appropriate color contrast. So making sure that the color of the text and the background color meet a specific ratio so that it's easily readable to everyone. We're also adding alternative text, or what's commonly referred to as alt text, to all of our graphics, images, charts, logos, just so that everybody, if you are using a screen reader, you can hear a description of it rather than just image and it moves on to the next part. So adding all of that so there's a description there. And then just a final example, we're maintaining and keeping a logical reading order, especially of PowerPoints and PDFs. Sometimes it's easy for the reading order to get a little bit wonky or out of order. And so there's a way to ensure that it starts with the title, moves to the heading, bullets, body text, and so forth. So those not all encompassing by any means, but just wanted to share a few examples of what we're working on to make sure that we are meeting those accessibility guidelines. And so we're working on these changes now, and I feel like we're in a really good spot, and we certainly plan to be compliant by that deadline come next April. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Pam. Are there any questions from any commissioners before we move on? All right, thank you, Pam. The next item on our agenda today will be a discussion and vote on LEA policy updates on first and final reading. I'd like to recognize our General Counsel, Ashley Thomas, to describe the proposed updates, please.
Thank you, Chair Smith. So every year, Commission staff works to review and update our policies internally. It's based on legislative changes as well as any updates to our business practices. And so I'm just going to go through the policies that had substantive edits, and that will be up for a vote for this committee. Okay, so the first one is LEA Policy 1800, school calendar. We updated the reasons for usage of stockpile days. That's in line with the legislative update. LEA Policy 1803, which is the smoke-free environment. We also updated the statutory language, for example, that included that the no smoking signs in all schools need to be on every entrance rather than throughout the building. So the statute changed that language, so we made our policy match that. Policy 2400, revenues and school fees. We removed a reporting calendar reference. It was a item on the reporting calendar, and that just reduces administrative burden on our schools. We are proposing to repeal LEA Policy 2701, financial records based on legislative updates, again, reducing administrative burden to our schools. LEA Policy 2702, inventory and equipment. We removed the requirement that the definition of equipment be at least as restrictive as the state's definition. So basically, we just adjusted that language to align with state statute. LEA Policy 3400 deals with transportation. We reassigned responsibility from commission staff to the school level staff for issuing those bus driver certificates. LEA Policy 3600 deals with insurance. Here we are matching statutory language. Initially, we said that the language was permissive about teachers joining the group insurance plan, but statute says that they shall join a group insurance plan, so we made that update. LEA Policy 4211 is the work-based learning program. We introduced language that says the policy only applies if the school offers the work-based learning. LEA Policy 4212 deals with virtual instruction. We updated the language to match the current rule regarding the parameters of virtual instruction for our schools. LEA Policy 4400 deals with instructional materials. We updated language there dealing with waivers for our schools. LEA Policy 4406 deals with internet safety. We added language around school level protection regarding the internet that are required in statute. LEA Policy 4603 deals with promotion and retention. We added language to clarify the specifications around promotion pathways. LEA Policy 6313, we introduced language dealing with prohibition on cell phones in classrooms. That's in relation to new legislation that passed this year. We are introducing a new policy, which is will be LEA Policy 6318, alternative to exclusionary discipline practices for pre-K. So this policy is being developed because we do have a few schools that have pre-K classes, and so we need policies to sort of give regulations there. Even though technically they are not a part of our charter agreement, we want to make sure that we are appropriately giving that oversight and monitoring for those students that are in the buildings of our schools. LEA Policy 6500 deals with restraint and isolation. Here we reassign responsibility for drafting those restraint and isolation records. We're giving that to the charter school personnel rather than having the commission staff hold that. And then we will just be notified as those records are updated. LEA Policy 6503, here it is just an update to language term. The policy currently states homeless students, and we are just changing that to read students experiencing homelessness. And then finally, for first and final reading, is LEA Policy 6920, which is reporting criminal offenses. This language was updated to align with statute. It reclassifies the crime of sharing information, and that's detailed in the policy, and so we're just making that match state statute. If there are questions on particular policies, just let me know.
Yep, Commissioner Griscom?
So the one on cell phones, can you explain exactly, because that issue is being talked about a lot in school systems, so can you sort of add a little more meat to what that means, what it is, and that our schools will have to abide by our policy, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I will turn it over to Hayden to discuss the statute, and then I'm happy to go into the language in our policy.
So the statute requires every school to develop their own policy, and it leaves it fairly open-ended in terms of how schools comply. But essentially, any sort of device that is capable of sharing data between it and another device are restricted during instructional time. So all of our schools will have to comply with that and have their own policy. There are some exceptions, generally, if it's for instructional use. So if they're using iPads in the classroom because the teacher, the teacher's lesson plan calls for it, that's fine. Any sort of health tracking app, so any glucose monitors, things like that, are fine. And then anything that's included in a student's ILP, IEP, any sort of 504 plan, any sort of devices like that. And of course, any sort of accessibility technology is also exempted. So if a student's using technology due to a disability, that's exempted as well. So those are the general exemptions. We've talked through this with all of our schools at our stakeholder meetings a few weeks ago.
And then just to add on to that, thank you, Hayden. Our policy requires our schools to develop a policy of how they're going to implement the prohibition on cell phones. We included language of the exceptions that Hayden just laid out as well. And so from here, once the policies have been discussed and approved, I will communicate to our schools what's been renewed, what's been updated, what's now effective, and then we go through a policy audit with our schools. And this will be a policy that I will ask them to submit and review to make sure it complies with the law and our policy.
I think it'll be interesting also just to see how schools actually implement this policy. In other words, do they go beyond what's required by law? And what positive benefits might arise as a result of that? And how we might even sort of encourage a sharing of best practices in that regard.
Kind of following up on that, do we see any high cost associated with implementing this? Like, I know that some schools get the lockers that something that every phone has to go in. Have we heard any feedback from schools on that?
I don't know that we've heard any direct feedback. I will say, the legislature left it open-ended on how schools want to comply with this. So I know it's, Yonder pouches that are used at concerts have been something that's discussed a lot. Some have been talking about just keeping them in the office. I mean, you could even just have a designated spot in the classroom so it's really up to the school to decide how they want to implement it. And I'm sure there's various low-cost options they could explore.
Commissioners, do we have any other questions or comments before we recommend adoption of the LEA policy as a consent agenda on first and final reading to the full commission?
Just a very quick clarification on the school-level language, protection language for the internet safety. You could just expand on that. I'm just trying to understand what that pertains to, and what do we, who's protected by that? How are we protecting them?
Absolutely. So that is LEA Policy 4406, statute updated, and what we changed in our policy includes that each charter school has to adopt a policy regarding internet safety, and it needs to include some language on the protection of safety and security of students accessing email, chat rooms, and other forms of direct or electronic communication that may use the internet in school. Additionally, it reiterates the prohibition on wireless communication devices in the classroom.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Griscom? All right, do I have a motion to approve? And I'll second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is approved. All right, we have one item on final reading from our March meeting. Ashley, you're recognized again.
Thank you, Chair Smith. So this policy is LEA Policy 1801. It's our special education policy. Between first and final reading, we did engage with some of our stakeholders, some of our schools, to hear feedback on the language. There was a slight adjustment to a couple of items, and I'll go over those now. We introduced language of the Commission's responsibility to work with potential external providers as it relates to external placements for students with disabilities. Language was introduced that ensures a full continuum of services and placements, and that is a responsibility of the Commission as well as the LEA. And then we adjusted the language regarding least restrictive environment and potential external placement. It still deals with a complete IEP assessment and the Commission being a part of that. But there was some feedback from some of our schools, and I'll leave it to Tess to expound on, but that is the content that was adjusted between first and final reading, but I'll turn it over to Tess.
Thank you, Ashley. Yes, just want to thank our operators for engaging in a rigorous communication around feedback of how we can clarify the responsibilities of the commission in the charter schools, particularly in those rare instances where we do have to seek out external placement. But I think we feel very confident in the fact that we've clarified the language should be rare, that it should be on the basis of a decision of the IEP team, which is in alignment with federal law. And then that the expectation is that charter schools first demonstrate and provide a complete attempt to serve the student first with all of their available resources before an external placement is discussed. I also want to name that, serving students with disabilities and providing the continuum of services and doing so within the funds available are things that districts across the state, across this nation discuss regularly. And so we are very much in alignment with how many other districts are working to provide all of these services with the resources provided by the state and federal government. And with that, we're happy to take any questions.
Any questions from commissioners? Great. Do we have a motion to recommend adoption of LEA Policy 1801 on final reading to the full commission? I'll second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. All right, the next items on our agenda are updates to commission policy. Ashley, you're recognized again.
Thank you, Chair Smith. By comparison, these commission policies really govern the business of the commission as an authorizer. We do have a few policies up for discussion. The first is Policy 3.100, dealing with charter agreements. We're introducing new language related to the new legislation. We're describing the charter terms that can be granted on a renewal appeal. As you know, the new language gives the commission the authority to grant a charter agreement from 5 to 10 years, and so we're introducing language in our policy to reflect that. And we also discussed the interim review and how that will work if a charter school is approved for an agreement less than 10 years. As Maggie discussed in our last committee, there's a midpoint high-stakes review, and so we just wanted to reflect that that will occur even if your charter agreement is less than 10 years. Commission Policy 3.600 deals with the renewal of our commission-authorized charter schools, and it is that renewal criteria that was discussed at the SPA committee meeting. We are making that a part of this policy. I'm happy to take any questions on those two policies at this time.
Any questions from commissioners? All right, do we have a motion to recommend adoption of commission policies 3.100 and 3.600 on first and final reading to the full commission? I'll second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is approved. Do we have any questions before voting on the next item?
I don't believe I've described this item. So this is a new policy. This will be Commission Policy 3.010. This is born out of our discussion the commission had last month regarding the replication applications and rules and policies that we needed to develop. This will detail the commission's consideration criteria that the commission will use and the process that will go through any direct application we might receive. It includes the details related to a capacity interview as well as a review of an amended application should we get there. It sets forth the 3 pathways that may come before the commission. And if there are adjustments, this is on first reading and it will come back in October for final reading.
All right, any questions for Ashley? All right, do we have a motion to recommend adoption of Commission Policy 3.010 on first reading to the full commission? I'll second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion's approved. Do we have any questions before voting on the final commission policy?
And this would be Commission Policy 3.700, which is the school performance framework that was discussed in the SPA committee. Again, as this is a commission policy, it had to come to this committee to be reviewed for legality. I did work with the authorizing team. Unless there are additional questions, as Chair Smith said, I believe this is ready for a final vote.
I'll second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion's approved. The final items on our agenda are commission rule updates. Ashley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Smith. So these will be new rules for the commission related to replication applications. We were given limited authority to engage in rulemaking for these rules. This would be a new rule to establish review of a replication application. It will include requirements of a letter of intent, an application fee. The rule sets the application fee at $2,500. As we explained last month in our Committee of the Whole, this matches the application fee that is used across the state by other authorizers as well. And it sets forth the requirements of what a complete application is. It also explains the Commission's responsibilities to both the applicant and the local LEA. That includes notification of an application's completeness, notice of a public hearing, which will be presided over by the executive director or the Commission's designee, as well as the conducting of a capacity interview during that initial application period. The rule includes language of a timeline for the commission to make a decision, 90 days for an initial application, 60 days for an amended application, and then as well as the consequence of failing to issue a decision, which would be a deemed approval. The rule does name that the applicant's rights, should an initial application be denied, and of course that is, they have the right to amend that application and resubmit it for consideration. And then finally, the rule does stress that a decision by the commission on an amended application is final and not subject to appeal. You will notice on the agenda, this rule, the content of it is presented to you all twice. This is presented first as an emergency rule, and then it is also presented as a permanent rule. And the reason for that, an emergency rule will be effective upon filing, and the permanent rule has to go through a rulemaking hearing and then be presented to GovOps, and it takes a little bit longer. But because we could potentially see applications as early as this fall, we wanted to make sure we had rules in place to really guide the work that we do, especially this is the first time that we will have an application from its inception. And at this time, I will pause for any questions before we proceed.
Any questions from commissioners? Do we want to explain the rest or go ahead and vote on this one? Oh, go ahead.
I also wanted to name that you all were sent a draft of the replication application that the State Board of Education is working on that will accompany and be really the meat of what is asked for in the replication process. And so I just wanted to note that we had a really robust discussion in June. Around what are some of the things we would want to consider in a replication evaluation. A lot of that lives in that application that's being developed by the State Board of Education right now and that we have been working very closely with them on. And so I just wanted to name that, if you haven't had an opportunity to review that draft application, a lot of the things that we talked about in June live there, plus really outlining what we expect of our process and how we're going to handle the intake of applications should we receive them in the rule.
And then I think the only addition, as Tess was speaking, I know Commissioner Griscom, you asked in June for a crosswalk between what other districts ask for and what we may ask for. I think the only thing of note is that a public hearing or public meeting is not necessarily required by statute, but I believe the conversation from the commission was that that was an important part of the process, and that is reflected in the rule, and I think that's the only addition, if you want to say that, between us and other districts.
Thank you, Ashley. Do we have a motion to recommend adoption of Commission Emergency Rule 1185-01-04 on first and final reading to the full commission? So moved. I'll second. All rule votes must be by roll call. Hayden, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Griscom. Chair Smith.
Aye.
Madam Chair, you have 2 ayes.
Thank you, Hayden. All right, let's move to the next item, please, Ashley.
Thank you, Chair Smith. So this is the permanent rule that will go through a rulemaking hearing process. If this is approved by the full commission, what will happen? I will file the emergency rules immediately. As I stated, they will be effective for 180 days. If the permanent rules are approved on first reading, I will schedule a rulemaking hearing to solicit public comment. They will be presented to the commission in October for feedback of whether or not you will adopt those public comments and make changes to those rules. That will then be filed with the Secretary of State and will become our permanent rules. If I had to give a timeline, I'm thinking possibly January or February. But as I said, the emergency rules are effective for 180 days, and so that overlap will make sure that we do not go without rules around this process.
Any questions? All right, do we have a motion to recommend adoption? I'll second. Hayden, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Griscom. Chair Smith.
Aye.
Madam Chair, you have 2 ayes.
Thank you, Hayden. All right, and we have one final item. Ashley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Smith. This final item are rules on our amendment appeals. We are proposing slight changes to our amendment appeals rules based on the 2025 legislative session. The changes include a requirement for authorizers to report any petitions for amendments received to the commission as well as their authorizer, as well as it requires the governing bodies to file their LOIs to the commission in addition to their authorizer. Like, as I stated, this is a result of changes in legislation and changes in process where those documents will sort of live with the commission as well as the authorizer, and so we want the rules to reflect the legislation as well.
Any questions from commissioners? And I'll second. Hayden, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Griscom. Chair Smith.
Aye.
Madam Chair, you have 2 ayes.
Thank you, Hayden. The motion is approved. Thank you very much, Ashley and Hayden and Tess and the whole team. I know this has been a lot to sort through, so we truly appreciate all you've done to get us here. Do we have any comments before we close? Okay. The next meeting of the Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee is currently scheduled for October 16th, 2025. If there's nothing further, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? I will second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We're adjourned.